too. So I say that jokingly because my picture's up here. When I poured in the Senate, I said to Nathan, I said, "Do you recognize that person?" It was me. He said, "No, I don't know who that is." Dave Kelly said, "Oh man, you had black hair one time?" So, but Brandon's a great example of life skills. He graduated from the road home to the Rio Grande Hotel, and he does most of his shopping at Maverick. And one day, one of his friends said to him, "Hey, what are you buying?" And he says, "I'm buying laundry detergent." It was like $9 for a little thing. And this guy said to him, "Why would you buy it there? You know, you need to go to Walmart." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, I bought all my stuff at 7-Eleven and Maverick my whole life. And we forget that we take for granted that we've been taught to how to economize and shop and things like that. So, and Brandon sends his regrets. He'll be at our next meeting. He wants to tell a story because now we got him a job and he is living at the Gateway and doing very well. Did you know that, Jason? He's over at the Gateway. Awesome. He's got a parking, really doing well. So that's kind of the update. I wanted to see, is there anybody from the county that can give an update? Did I say enough about the collective impact? Tiffany, do you want to say something?
Shailene sends her regrets.
She sends her regrets, okay. The next one, we have, how many more members? Do you have that sheet?
Yeah.
We have, and I want to make sure that we recognize them all. And then I want to recognize Jonathan. Jonathan?
The county did, I did want to say one thing, they unanimously decided to move forward with the collective, and like all the things we came up with as our collective outcomes we want to go. So that has actually been unanimously approved that we're going to move forward on that and steer money in those directions. So.
Do you want to just, can you remember like five? Yes.
I think actually we moved to put it out to the community for public impact and public comment, but they haven't been approved yet. They just said we feel good about this, so now it's out in the community for public comment.
Very good.
But it's the ways that the county's going to make funding decisions moving forward, so it's really meaningful for anyone who cares about the way that services are provided.
It's data metrics.
Yeah, well, it's not the specific metrics, but it's sort of the values that will guide every decision that's made. But it's like $50 million a year of money that is going out that will be impacted by these metrics that are to come up with. So if you have an interest in learning about that or weighing in on it, you should.
Do you know when that meeting is?
There's one next week.
Yeah.
Is it next Thursday morning?
What was nice is we all in the group at least came to an agreement on what to put out there to the public, and it's comprised of so many different
It's on the
individuals.
agenda, Scott.
Oh, good. Okay.
It's unusual to have a race to consensus, but that was really the case in this, that everybody felt really good about the process and the decisions that were made.
Thanks to Jonathan. It's on the agenda. So did everybody get a copy of the agenda? If not, we'll pass them out. There you go. We'll just pass these out here so we can have them. Share them over here. So it is October 14th at the county from 8:30 to 10:30 in the north building, room N to 800. I'm kind of tap dancing waiting for Mayor Becker to come. So we, Brandy, do you want to give an update from Deputy Sharman? He was going to give an update. Do you guys want to do that?
I wasn't instructed to give an update, so I don't really have anything.
Well, do you want to come up and then you can just tell us a little bit about what's going on, Brandy, and why don't you, yeah, you both can. Yeah, Mike.
We can just, post it because people there probably aren't too familiar with those.
Yeah, I see familiar faces. So I'm Detective Brandy Culver. This is my partner, Detective Mike McKenna. We are police officers downtown, and we specialize in assisting homeless people utilize the resources available for them. It's the Homeless Outreach Service Team Post. You guys may have seen the red meters and stuff like that. We manage those. And then we work with homeless individuals like Brandon. We've worked with him for a long time. He's a great guy. Assisting them in getting ID, jobs, housing, basically, transitioning back into normal living, productive members of society. So that's our goal.
Michael, you want to talk a little bit about what you've taken off the street since you guys have been there? I know it's a ton of stuff.
Well, yeah, I think, and referring back to probably, I think what was released in the media as well, is oh geez, millions of dollars worth of drugs, you know, I think over 30,000, you know, individual doses of drugs, you know, hundreds and hundreds of arrests. So really the focus downtown has really made an impact, and we're seeing it just in the way that community business owners are expressing their things to us as well, and our presence down there. So it does seem to be making a difference.
Good. And if any of you, do you want to give them the phone number to call?
Our office number, if you wanted to refer any homeless to us for assistance, is 801-799-3035.
799-3035. I call it often. Yes.
I'm just curious about is that office relocating?
Good question.
You know, it's been talked about, but we're still not sure if the size of the other location we're looking at is big enough to do.
That's one on Second and
Because we're
Fifth.
hiring that team of caseworkers, so we're not sure if it's big enough to house them, plus hold the meetings that we have weekly. So
Okay.
we're not positive yet.
How many post officers are there currently?
Just us.
And how many people do you think you service?
Uh,
Approximate ballpark, is you just in the Pioneer Park neighborhood?
Total or
Just a guess.
or average at a time? I
And
mean,
everyday average.
It's really hard to say, and you know, we have different types of people we help. We have people that come in one time and they get a bunch of information and we don't see them again. We hope they run with it. But then we probably have 10 to 15 at a time that kind of follow up with us, and we kind of case manage. And our goal moving forward is to case manage a little bit more with this team of caseworkers, where, you know, that's not what we, as police officers, were originally hired to do. So it's kind of a different dynamic for us to be case managers. So hopefully we'll get more into the case management. I mean, total contacts we've made, we're at about 450 right now that have come into our office and requested help and gotten information. So.
Are there any programs currently in place or planned for you to work directly with the security at some of these facilities, such as the Rio Grande? Is there anything in place now, or is there something that's planned to be in place so that the liaison and the communication between private security and law enforcement can be a little more effective?
As far as the security is concerned, it's all done privately. And so as far as the police involvement in the hiring and making sure the security is there, law enforcement isn't really involved in that process. But with security, now that they have security of the road home and the Catholic Community Services, we are in contact with them. We do communicate with them because we do overlap in a lot of instances. And like you said, there are always things that we can do better, communicate better, and that's something that we're continually working on just to make it altogether a safer environment for everybody down there.
I have a question. I think barrier code trumps all of that. If you think about communication and enforcing Utah barrier code, meaning to say the protected areas that children inhabit, whether it's Spy Hop, the playground at Pioneer Park, the playground at the road home, the planetarium, the Children's Discovery Museum, or a higher ground for learning, and there are multiple incidences that occurred. And with a heavy heart, I just looked at the Utah Corrections site. There are, I don't know, approximately 50 predators living in the road home, and of those 50, when I did a sampling, top 15, 80% are child predators. So there's an obligation on the part of the police department, and because of barrier code and because of Utah code, maltreatment, abuse, and neglect, that trumps any kind of private sort of situation, because you're going to have to go in and enforce the code.
Sure.
So,
no, I don't think there's like a disconnect where we would not step on their toes. If we need to be involved, we are. And I think to answer his question, we are in communication with them. I don't know that there's like a formal communication, but I'm really familiar with all of them. I have some of their cell phone numbers. They text me pictures, kind of stuff like that. So, I mean, if there are instances where we need to jump in and grab some they call us.
Well, what about the predators that are non-compliant? What about the lack of IDs? I mean, we have, and this is from
Yeah, it's a
Deputy
problem.
Chief and from former Deputy Chief Red Ross. They're just, we're surrounded by that kind of thing, Pioneer Park neighborhood. I think we can verify that.
Right. Yeah, they're definitely out there, and we try to ID them and locate them.
98 just in the immediate area of the park on the Utah Corrections site today. And that includes a HUD facility, the road home, and a couple of apartments with 1 or 2 people right in my neighborhood, because I live at Pierpont Moms. It's right in my neighborhood. And in the city, there are 480.
Right.
And that's not even close, according to Fred and according to Deputy Chief Sharma.
That's a good question. I think that's something that we're going to have to really concentrate on. Derek is the perfect person to ask that question. He could probably set up some collaboration because he's the vice president. So I think this is the real value of the coalition, is that you get together and talk about having a collaboration, maybe meeting 2 times or 3 times a week just for a half hour and say, hey, we're on this one, we're on that one. So I'm impressed with both these detectives. They do really good work down there. And they're just not the only ones there. I mean, at any time, especially this last little while, there's been a barrage, and millions of dollars have been taken off the street of drugs, as well as we've got some really bad people, really bad people.
Scott, we had on average 175 twists landed right around Pierpont Lofts. That includes cocaine and heroin, also spice vials, on average every week that we were trying to remove. And right now we're down to about 10. You are blocking, the police department has roadblocks on Pierpont on a regular basis, 2nd South. It's not just, when they say close Rio, oh no. You'd have to close 2nd South, you'd have to close Pierpont, you'd have to close multiple roads, and the police know this. So there is a difference in policing and what's happening.
Sure.
We have cartel charging their phones at our place.
So Clotilde is the Pioneer Park Coalition co-chair of the neighborhood subcommittee. She and Christian Harrison work on that. And also Clotilde is a PhD candidate at the University of Utah on these very issues. So we're pretty fortunate to have her in that. And she knows the barrier laws. And do you all know what the barrier laws are? It's the proportion, the amount of property that you can have between you and a registered sex offender. And the barrier laws are set up to protect innocent children. And so when she talks about that, right now, registered in the road home, and what was the number? Because it's all online.
So in August in the Trib, it was listed at 61. And what I sold today was just under 50.
Okay.
In the road home specific, but that doesn't include the HUD, the Rio Grande Hotel, which we called it, but now Home Inn.
Right.
It doesn't include the home.
Upon us to not have a solution to, where are these individuals going to go, and what would you do with them if they didn't have their road home? So we got to look at this in the broad spectrum. We don't want to just be the people that always poke at them and raise our hand and say, this is why you're failing, this is what you're doing. We're really working hard to come up with a solution, but the data is what's driving us towards a solution that will work for everyone. And so that's where we are.
Well, I'll be in just a few minutes.
He'll be right here. So I want to introduce our new members real quick. We continue to grow. We're almost up to 500. Esther Hunter, who's the community council representative from District 4, Semi Makuba, who has Same Sushi. Am I saying that right? You know, is it Same Sushi? It's a great place to eat, and it's right next to the Homewood Suite. And she is spectacular to hang in there and do that. What day do you guys meet?
Tuesday.
Tuesday at what time?
Noon time.
At noon. If you want to be part of the conversation with some coalition members who are just trying to make a difference, go there Tuesday at noon, have some great sushi, number one, and number two, teaching an urban design class. And would you mind if we took on the project of developing a new homeless shelter and what it would look like? And what if we could just take a blank sheet of paper, what would it be? And who did you pick to come up and take 1 minute and talk about it? Ashley? Is Ashley still there? Okay, Christian? Okay, come on up. This is the student right here that's going to recreate the world.
So my name is Patrick Matheson. I'm an urban design student under Soren Simonson with a team of about 6 other urban design students. And along with the architecture studio at the University of Utah, we're looking at issues of homelessness and services. The architecture students are specifically focusing, I believe, just on the road home and redesigning the road home to better serve the populations there, specifically children, I know. And as an urban design studio, we're interested in how facilities could be redesigned to better integrate into the urban fabric in either downtown Salt Lake or maybe other sites across the Wasatch Front. Our first assignment was to look at all of the homeless service facilities across the Wasatch Front, to map them, to see if there are any gaps that exist in population centers across the Wasatch Front. And now we're moving into looking at selecting sites for different kinds of services, and then we'll be designing those services and how they fit into the rest of the city. And at the end of the semester, we'll be showing our studio, all the work that we've been doing this whole semester in the studio, at a location either at the downtown library or maybe the Leonardo.
We're working for the Leonardo, but we've been able to make contact there. Maybe at the library or City Hall.
Okay, so we would invite you to come to that, and we'll definitely work through Scott to get out, to reach out to all of you to show you what we've been working on come December. So.
And if you think that it's just a group of people who are just getting together, these are really data collectors. They just met with HIMAS this morning, the HIMAS team, that's the homeless, what's it called? Management system. So they met with them this morning to start to collect all the data. So barriers of entry, how many services are clustered here, what's the maps look like. So this is just not people sitting down and saying drawing. They're data driven on what the population looks like, foot traffic, how many are going over the 4th Street Clinic, what kind of patterns do they have. And so it's really exciting that this generation has stepped up to try and solve homelessness. Clotilde.
Okay, a couple of quick questions, and bravo, and thank you, Soren. I wonder, are you doing any interviewing of people experiencing homelessness, for example, youth, et cetera? And are you inputting that sort of human geographical concept of the way people negotiate space from their point of view, not just your point of view?
Yeah.
So that's happening?
Yeah, well, so we're just starting into the site analysis, and because we've just finished this large-scale analysis of homeless services across the region, and now that we're moving into site analysis, we'll all be picking different kinds of services that we're going to be focusing on. So as we move into that, I expect that will be part of our design considerations of how do these people experience these spaces.
So are you looking at this broadly, not just from an architectural point of view, but I'm going to use the word again, human geography, the way people use space.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the separation between urban design and architecture.
That's
Architecture
what I want people to know that.
Yeah,
because they don't know that.
Architecture would be the building inside of it and the exterior feel, but urban design is how it relates to the rest of the city, and how people experience that space and things like that. So, great.
And how that even can affect behavior.
Right.
Spaces can redefine behavior. We
Right.
see this all the time.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable project. I mean, I feel really fortunate and blessed to have the opportunity to do that. And thanks to Soren for doing that.
We've got a couple of other students here. Why don't we have them stand real quick?
We're all the students, yeah, from the urban design.
Some of them, we have an assignment due Friday.
Okay. Oh, they have an assignment due Friday.
So I gave them the option of sticking around for the interviews or going back and working on their assignment. But we've got a couple here, Cassie Younger and Andy Polka.
So, thank you.
Hey, thanks, Patrick. We appreciate that. So, just so we're not repeating questions, and Ralph's going to be right here, I've received about 5 questions of people who all of a sudden couldn't come, and I just want to read a couple of these, and if you're going to ask them, I won't. The first one, it says, leadership versus management. The largest group managed is the city employees. What's your style, and how do you get the best out of folks? For Ralph, it's how many have you managed? For Jackie, what's the largest team you managed? And the second question is, rather than bicycle patches, what is your comprehensive vision to restore the homeless problem? And are you willing to publish that vision and framework it before the election so that constituents can hold you to it? given the plan has flexibility to incorporate recommendations from the commissions. So that's one question. If A's going to ask that, then I won't ask it. Go ahead. The other one that I just got is, this is from Dusty Harris, who manages and they own the Gateway. My question is, on behalf of the owners of the Gateway office buildings, we have serious concerns about not only an unsafe environment for our tenants, but also what appears to be a perilous conditions for the city's homeless. Status quo is not only bad for the city's progress and economy, but also for the homeless people. What will you do to change this and change it now? Sorry, I can't make it to the meeting. Anybody, those three questions, anybody was focused on? Nicole?
Mine asks that, and then mine kind of pinpoints on that.
Okay. All right.
Business owner, just, you know, what incentives do we have from them to stay downtown in an area that we love to continue to support it? What assurances do we have?
Okay.
What are they going to do about it?
All right. I'll be happy. There's another hand to somebody else. Is everybody okay then on those questions? All right. I think the next thing that we got is Ralph should be walking up the stairs in a second. And having been a candidate many times in my career, I can tell you that the worst thing in the world is when your staff is saying, you got to be there, and you're some event, and somebody's grabbed you and said, I just have to have you answer this one more question. You're looking at your watch going, I got to be there, so I can cut him a little bit of slack. Yes?
Who owns the property that
Great question. Great question.
home is on?
Great question.
Who does that?
I'm happy to answer that for you. So the Road Helm has a board, much like the Pioneer Park Coalition board, and then they have an executive committee. That board reports up to what's called Shelter the Homeless. And that property, the title of the property is to Harris Simmons, who is the CEO of Zions Bank. Then on the title is the LDS Church, and I think they have their presiding bishop or someone that might do that. And then the third one, I just forgot. I can't remember who that one is, but they are the owners, and the main owners are Harris Simmons of Zions Bank. It's kind of been in a family trust. So at the end of the day, they own the building, they own the property, and they're really the ones that are going to say, you're going to move or you're not going to move. And we've had conversations with Harris Simmons, and Pete has had conversations with Harris as well. And if you have an opinion, I'd encourage you to call Harris, or I'd encourage you to call anybody or the LDS Church and just say, you know, we have concerns about this. Yeah, positive or negative, I think that's pretty cool. Any other questions? Look, it's my great pleasure to introduce Mayor Ralph Becker. If you look out here on the wall, you'll see some really young guys whose pictures are on there. And now we both have the same color hair, but we just have black hair. I just want you to know. So I worked with Ralph during the legislature. I also worked with Jack Biscupsky, which is interesting enough. So without further ado, what we want to do, Mayor Becker, if you're okay, because I know you're on a tight schedule, maybe you just take 1 minute and kind of do an intro, and then we're just going to open it up to questions and welcome and thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it. Honorable Mayor Ralph Becker.
Thanks for inviting me to join you. I always get nervous when someone puts honorable before someone who's a politician. but thanks. So, first of all, many of you I know, if not all of you, are really heavily involved, and I've recognized many of you from the many meetings I've been in around the Pioneer Park Coalition, around homeless issues, around Pioneer Park, the Depot area, the whole area, and the efforts that I've been involved in now solidly from my first days in office almost 4 years ago. And I will say that not only here but across the country, that the homeless situation facing cities is one of the most persistent, challenging problems facing all cities across the country. The city of LA just last week or the week before declared a state of emergency in their city over their homeless problems. So we're not alone, but that is not comforting because we know the challenges for our homeless population, our homeless friends, and providing them the services and facilities they need. And we also know the impacts it has in the immediate area of where the facilities are, but also across the whole community. I've been meeting with homeless providers literally from my first days in office, and we have regular meetings. I recognize some of the folks who we meet with. We've been meeting quarterly around how do we best take care of our homeless population, what kinds of things we can do to help them be successful and help the rest of the community be successful. So as all of you know, because I know all of you are involved in one way or another, addressing homelessness is multifaceted, it's complex, and it isn't easy. And so the way I tend to try to think about it is we have two basic matters to deal with. One of them is the immediate issues around our homeless population and the impacts they have on our city, and particularly in the neighborhood. And the second part of it is we know that our existing facilities and services are not doing the best job that they can and should to address homelessness. So we have focused almost all of our attention until this year on the first part of that, and that is, how do we provide for our homeless? How do we address the increasingly worse problem around all of the drug dealing activity and crime that's embedded within the homeless population? They're the greatest victims, by the way, of all of that. And how do we get our facilities to function well? And we have put more and more, when I say we, I mean private and public, more and more resources into addressing those current problems. And last year, for example, we established a metro unit. So we have a unit of our police department in that area that was supposed to be focused on the area. Beginning this summer, we took some steps that we are beginning to see real differences from. And I know from meetings we've had on a 30-day and 60-day review since we implemented those steps, that they're having some effect, but the problems persist, and we're nowhere near where we need to be. When Chief Mike Brown came into office and he looked at the way we were deploying our police force and using all of our collective resources, within a week he said, we've got to do this differently. And collectively as a city and with our partners, both our partners who provide for the homeless, our partners in the criminal justice system, the prosecutors, the jailers, the judges, and our partners around the region, we have made some major changes that we're really beginning to see effects from. So that includes having a permanent police force who do not leave the area. And so they're full-time there, they're not jumping around the city as was happening in the past. We have also been able to bring the bike squads back, which make a huge difference because they're able to move much more easily among the population and around town. We have added some police officers because the way the redeployment worked enabled us to do that. And we are bringing both new police officers and with the new budget bringing in new social service workers because this is this isn't an issue of just crime, it's also an issue of getting people into the right treatment and services into play. We have added storage lockers because one of the problems was that the homeless, when they left the shelter in the day, had nowhere to go. They were carrying their stuff in shopping carts and just moving around. We provided storage for the homeless, and we now have about 200 folks using that now. And we have been able to work out an agreement, for our police to come into the facilities. They weren't allowed to come in unless there was a response to an emergency request. So, excuse me. And we're cleaning the streets every day. So we're seeing the effects of that, both in terms of reduction in crime and changes. Thanks, Scott. And changes in the crime. So in the case of minor offenses, which you've also started to enforce on a lot more, those numbers are going up, but we're pulling huge quantities of drugs off the street. Now, cartels just bring people in to replace them. But the effect is that after a while, they start losing enough money that they start changing their practices as well. So we've pulled, I've got the numbers here, but we've pulled like $1 million of drugs off the street just in the last 90 days. And most of it's heroin. It's heroin, cocaine, and spice are the main three drugs. And then we've been booking and obviously making lives difficult, much more difficult for the drug dealers. And then for the drug purchasers, we made it clear to them, you come down, you're going to get arrested. And we know that bringing them to jail is not an effective approach, so we started diverting them right directly into treatment and those programs. So we're seeing some effect there. But as importantly is how do we deal with this issue long term? Because we know our current facilities are not set up to address the needs today. We've done significant assessments and had some great help from the university and other folks in doing some great assessments of our homeless population. And it resulted in, from the county looking at the services side, from the city looking at the facilities side, us together starting a process that is a year-long process, so we're now 3/4 of the way through, to determine what's the most effective service needs and model for us using the collective impact model. So we start using a more sort of quantitative and results-based approach to how we're providing services. And by the way, we're spending $50 million a year on our homeless population in the state. And then merging that with the work that's being done with the commission on the city side, chaired by Gail Miller and Palmer DePaulis, and has all of the providers, businesses, representatives from your group, residents, and the various governmental entities, to look at the facilities so that we have now, going forward, an approach that matches services and facilities effectively. We have, for the first time, and I'll note that Scott at the last meeting said, you know something? For the first time, we can say, he felt he could say at least, that we are coming together rather than everyone splintering apart with different ideas about how to provide the best facilities and services, and have the services dictate what those facilities are. At the end of this year, we will have that work done. We're on target. And I think we feel confident that the funding will follow. And that's the funding from this building, by the way, where there's some preliminary commitments. And Scott, you and others from the Pioneer Park Coalition have been great about working with our legislators as we have to set the stage for that in the next session. The private funders have all been at the table, and they have also made the commitment that they will follow the outcomes of this work. And as governmental entities, we're of course at the table and doing the same thing. So we think we have a very good path forward. And we know we can be successful. And the reason is because, it's funny, when I travel outside of the state, almost anywhere I go, people come up to me and they say, what are you guys doing to have such great success around your homeless population? Because we were the first place in the country to effectively eliminate veterans' homelessness. And in a target that was set 10 years ago to eliminate homelessness, focusing on the chronically homeless in both cases, we are 90% of the way there. I mean, we are, by census, by person, chronicling what's been happening with the homeless friends. So anyway, that's kind of where we are, and happy to answer questions if you have them. Oh, that's all right, thanks. Yeah,
You're good.
That's great, thanks. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's rarefied air in here. That's why these legislators always come up with wax.
Anyway, that's kind of where we are.
probably a little bit too much time on that part of it, but wanted to bring everyone up to speed. Many of you have been in these meetings that we've been having on these 30 and 60-day reviews with some of you.
So let's go ahead with Q&A. Who would like to be first?
I've got a quick question about the bicycle patrol with the police. I work for the triage detox that's run by the Volunteers of America as an outreach person in the community.
Thank you for that.
Okay, and that's several years ago. And talking to our clients on the street, they always called the police on bicycles bumblebees, and you never knew where they were coming from.
Right.
And they were very, very effective.
Yeah.
And then I heard you say that you've reinstated that. When did they start
So
doing that?
when the Metro unit got set up 2 years ago, Chief Burbank believed that it would be a more effective practice to have a Metro unit in that area, sort of with an office in that area, and changed around the deployment of the police force that included eliminating most of the bike patrols. We actually now have more bike patrols than we did even before, because you are right, the bike patrols are incredibly effective in so many ways. So that's what happened is they got pulled off 2 years ago when the Metro office got set up, and we put them back on immediately this summer. Thanks for your work, by the way, with community outreach.
Any other questions? Oh, Richard and Pete.
I have a question about the Station Center project.
Yeah.
It's a pretty complex, elaborate, large project that probably is worth hundreds of millions of dollars and will be the centerpiece of the Rio Grande neighborhood if it gets built. And I'm wondering how you feel about the prospects of it coming to pass in the current environment.
So it's quite remarkable, I think, for those of us who know this area, but we are beyond confident. We put out an RFP, a request for proposals, earlier this year for developers to come in around the first phase of the Station Center development. We had to go find another room because there were so many developers who showed up. We had a great response to the RFP. The developers have been selected, and someone might be able to update me on exactly where we are in sort of implementing the development plans. Is anyone here involved enough in that to know? But it is, it's progressing incredibly well. And we're also seeing, actually from one of the developers involved in the Station Center, Clearwater, a development going up on the west side of Pioneer Park there, a multi-family unit. I think it's 120 units, somewhere around there. That was in a parking lot just on the other side of Northwest Pioneer Park. So in a way, it's pretty remarkable, but it also shows the development potential if we can provide both the right environment, which despite the problems around our homeless population, and we've got, on First South, we've got a development going up too, just on the other side of 6th West, or between 5th and 6th West. And the development approvals are in, I don't know where they are in terms of the actual construction, going over to 2nd South between 5th and 6th West. So it's happening, and there's no doubt in my mind that will also help contribute to addressing some of the problems of this, sense that when you're in that area that you're unsafe and insecure. Because the more people we have living there and moving around there, the better the feel is going to be of the neighborhood.
Honorable Mayor, I'm going to do a little timekeeping if that's okay.
That's fine.
Someday you might get to do this. It's kind of fun. Pete?
Mayor, the 5th West camping situation seems to be as bad as ever. Even though the storage unit has been open and has over 100 people using those facilities. Are there any plans? Do you have any ideas? I suggested to Elizabeth Bueller that perhaps a chain link fence around that space long enough to kind of break the cycle might help. Mike Brown indicated he's just holding, rough quote, we're holding on by our fingernails until the snow flies, and then we hope, you know, it'll get under control and we won't let it get out of control next spring.
Right.
Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Elizabeth, because she may have some more updated information, but I've heard the same, because we were probably in the same meeting where Mike Brown described that to us. You know, there is a right, it is part of the public right-of-way, and there's a right for people to be there. They're not allowed to camp there overnight, but they're allowed to be there during the day. And of course, you know, that sprung up or got expanded in terms of the use of that area when the Wiegand Center was getting, was it the Wiegand Center that was being renovated? And so people weren't able to go there during the day, so they got used to hanging out on that Fifth West median there. And you can add to that if you want, Elizabeth, in terms of things that are going on, or Karen.
That really covers things. The police, every night, it is a park, so at closing time, post officers and other officers go around and everyone is asked to leave the Fifth West median, which they do. Unfortunately, they go and camp in other parts of the neighborhood that are not parks. We have looked at the fencing. Some of you might know, if you've been around the neighborhood, we have temporary fencing up in other sections. The problem with the Fifth West median is because it is so long, and also we have people, commuters especially, who use the central station and then go through Rio Grande to get to downtown. That would be a problem, fencing off the Fifth West median. So that's why we haven't fenced it off yet.
Okay. Okay. We know it's a problem, and you know, we sort of hate to have the weather be the sort of direction of the solution there. But I think what I heard Chief Brown say, which at least makes sense, is, you know, there are challenges for us to do much in the middle of the right-of-way, but when people get out of the habit, as they've now gotten into the habit of using that median area, of going back into the shelters for their support and assistance and doing their daytime activities, then you know, then it'll be easier to control them going back into that area. So, yes.
Hi, I'm the GM over at Red Brewing Company, and this past year, businesses on Second West, 5 of us all kind of chipped in, and we hired off-duty cops because of the problems that we were having. And I got into a conversation with one of the off-duty cops one day. Obviously, everyone has their own opinion as to why things are happening the way they're happening. And he said that, he goes, Stefan, he goes, every year I arrest multiple people that they have just arrived from either San Diego or Florida. And I look at them every single time and say, what the hell are you coming to Salt Lake City for? And they said the same answer comes from every single one of these people. He says it's easy to be homeless in Salt Lake City. And so obviously we want to help our homeless population, but how are we going to control like people getting the word out? Like, oh, I can go there and help. Like, how do we control the migrating here?
I wish I knew an answer to that that wasn't harsh and lacked compassion. But people are also coming here. I mean, one of the things that I'm hearing as well is that because our job economy is so good, we're the #1 job creating city in the country, that gets around. And people who are out of work and destitute come to Salt Lake City thinking they're going to be able to walk into the city and find a job. And of course it doesn't work that way. But our folks are telling us that is also a very regular occurrence, you know, that people just show up here and get off the bus or jump in a train or hitchhiking however they're getting here, and they don't have a home, they don't have any money, and they think they're going to walk into a job and have money. And that doesn't work either. So it's a combination of things. I don't think we ever want to say that we don't want to be taking care of people who are homeless regardless of where they're from and how they get here. And people have some solutions that wouldn't be cutting folks off who need help. We're certainly open to considering that.
Nicole, I think you were, oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Sis. Go ahead.
Which one?
You go first.
Okay.
Thank you for making an executive decision. Too late.
I just wanted to know what the city's going to do to support business owners down in the Rio Grande and Pioneer Park area, Gateway area, that actually want to stay there and continue to be a support in that area. But what's the city going to do to help us? And what assurance do we have, or what confidence can we put in that those solutions will be long-term and not just talk because of an election year?
Well, I think one of the things that we know about this community and we're known for all around the country is that when we decide we're going to do something as a community, we get it done. And the commitment that we see publicly and privately, because we know this is not just a Salt Lake City issue. And I can tell you, legislators up here on the Hill are, you know, they may have been blind to it for one reason or another years ago, but they are not now. And there is a commitment, I can tell you, at both every level of government, but also with the private funders who are sitting with us in every one of these commission meetings to make the investment when we get settled on the approach. And the problem has been, and you folks know this with the Pioneer Park Coalition as well, or better than anyone, is that everyone, and we've seen some of this even recently, right? Everyone is saying, here's the solution and here's the solution. And they're different approaches. And I'll give you my own perspective. A variety of I used to think I had the answers, and I've learned that I don't, that we need to collectively come to a decision and a consensus about that. Because if we're all fighting for something different, it is pretty hard for the folks who have the money, public and private, to come together and make the investment. And so that's the reason that we said, look, we've got to take a step back. So I'm actually confident that the resources will be there. We already have some preliminary indication of some very significant resources from the state. If we come up with something, we bring it to them in the next session of the legislature. So I don't think there's a lack of commitment or generosity in this community. I think it's a matter of us coming together and saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. Now we'll put the resources behind it.
Yes. Yes.
So my question is about the temporary ordinance 26 that is hanging over the head of the in-between hospice for the homeless right now. That's set to expire on December 16th, I think. But it's preventing us from using the old Guadalupe School building. We were able to take about 8 or 10 individuals, the sick, the most sick and dying off the streets. And part of our buildings, but the Guadalupe School building is sitting empty because we're unable to use it under this temporary ordinance. And the temporary ordinance also prevents us from actually keeping people through the end of life if they become bedridden, which transferring someone who's in the dying process to another facility is almost cruel, actually. And we've had to almost experience that with our first two deaths. So I just want to know what your position is, if we have your support to be able, as the winter months move in, to let that ordinance expire so that we can utilize that building and get another 20 or so people who are in the most sick and most grossly out.
So, Mayor, we got like 8 questions.
Okay. That's tough for me.
Well,
but let me, I'll answer real quickly, and then I want to turn to some other folks who may have a more current answer. First of all, thank you for the hospice work. I know that is incredibly valuable service now that wasn't available before. I assume, I'm going to turn to Karen here, I assume that's before the City Council. And it's, we push for changes before the council, and the chair and the council decide when they're going to put something on the agenda and take action. And I can tell you we have a lot of things backlogged from our vantage point, and this may be one of them. Karen, do you have any?
Yes.
Or Elizabeth?
I'm sorry, it's not a very good ad, I apologize. It was, because it was City Council initiated the temporary zoning ordinance, we actually don't have a timeline from our side on when it'll be heard.
So this is something that the City Council has in there. I mean, we can try to be helpful, which I'm sure we will. But for some reason, City Council doesn't always do what we ask, or it sounds like what you're asking. And you know, they've got their priorities and their needs. I'm not trying to say that in a derogatory way.
So I know Dathan's got a question. I know Derek's got a question. Patil has a question. Did you have one, Dave, too? And so Derek, I think you were next up.
Yeah, CDI, and that's who I represent, is contracted for both the state and Salt Lake City. So we have a lot of exposure to these areas where they have homeless issues. And I know, over like at the Rio Grande, they started building restroom facilities that are special, types of facilities. And I don't know if that's a state project or city project.
Is that Portland? That's a city project.
Maybe for that, it's absolutely going in the right direction, because a lot of the issues that we're having, like at Rio Grande, is just.
Yeah.
So I think that's in the right direction. You also talked about bike patrols, and that is absolutely an effective approach to patrolling these areas. My question is, are they currently in place? If they are in place, what is the territory that these officers are covering? And do you see doing this or pulling it back during the winter, the bike patrols? Or do you have other plans for it?
We have bike patrols now, actually not just in this area. There are bike patrols who are full-time dedicated. I think it's even almost 24/7 right now in this area. But we also have brought bike patrols back all over the city. Because they're, as everyone has noted here, who's spoken to it, they're an incredibly effective way for us to do our policing. And your other part of your question, I'm sorry, again, was?
In the winter.
Oh, in the winter. Yeah. We keep them going as long, unless, there's a foot of snow on the ground. They go all winter.
You have bike patrol in the Rio Grande area?
Yeah.
Right there?
Yeah, they're dedicated to the area.
So, who was it? Nathan, did you have a question? Derek, anybody have a question here? Okay, Clotilde, I know you have one.
Yeah, before you came, thank you, Mayor, for coming. And I want to make sure everybody hears, because I know some people couldn't hear in the back. Before you came, you were talking a little bit about Utah Barrier Code. And that's the notion, of course, that, and that's a criminal code that restricts the movement of sex offenders in protected areas that children frequent, including the playground at Pioneer Park, the road home. As you know, we now can go into the road home, the police. That includes children's discovery, etc., and Higher Ground for Learning, Spy Hop. When I looked at the Utah site for sex offenders, I noted that today there are 50 sex offenders listed as living in the road home, and when I sampled those, Mayor, 15, the top 15, I just looked at 15, 13 of those 15 are child predators. Child predators, including the rapists. In August, the trip listed 61, so we're still in that same area. So what I'm asking you is, what are you going to do to protect these children in the Pioneer Park neighborhood, especially our most vulnerable, now? And what can you do before the elections are over? How will you enforce barrier code now that you can go into these sheltering facilities?
Well, I'm so sorry that our officers who have left could probably answer that very directly and specifically in terms of how they're handling law enforcement. And I think our shelter providers can tell you how they address it, because I'm just not familiar with how they address predators and sex offenders, either in the road home or other facilities, or even in the neighborhood.
Well, what I'd like you to do is make a commitment to finding out more about this in conjunction with Josh Sharman, Deputy Chief, and let us know within one business day what you intend to do as the person where the buck stops. What you intend to do to protect children across class in the Pioneer Park neighborhood, both at Spy Hop, Higher Ground for Learning, the Road Home Playground, the Pioneer Park Playground, Children Police. HB House Bill 384, smart policing is certainly not helping that. So I'd like you to get back to me in a day's time.
So I'm going to ask someone who can respond much more quickly than I can, Elizabeth here, who's our, I'm sure all of you know her here, is our homeless services coordinator. So we now have a full-time homeless services coordinator. I've had someone in this position for a while. She does an incredible job. Hopefully all of you will get to work with her.
Elizabeth, and you,
I understand.
I wrote to you in June about this, and Elizabeth was copied. You did not get back to me in June.
If I may, let me finish answering your question.
You didn't answer it before. I'm hoping that you will.
I hadn't finished yet. So what I would say is to the extent we don't have the answer now, and I'm trying to do Elizabeth to see if we do or don't.
We do not. We don't have any immediate answer. There's been a chain of emails between Deputy Chief Sharman and we will try to get an answer. I don't know if it'll be by tomorrow, but
yeah. So we will get back to you quickly, because this is an area, you know, I don't want to speculate an answer that I do not know the answer to.
Well,
and I appreciate.
The children who are waiting for your solution, Mayor, and have been since June, Elizabeth. I have an email here that was sent to you, and Rachel from your office wrote back to me in June.
So I appreciate that this is an issue of not only great importance to you, but to all of us who care about protecting our children in the community. And that includes me, and I'm sure everybody in this room. And we will get back to you and the entire Pioneer Park Coalition quickly with how we are addressing the issue around child predators and this particular law that I'm not familiar with. And what other practices we're taking and pursuing to address making sure our children are safe in the community. Because as you know, this is not an issue just in this area, it's true throughout the community.
So I look forward to your immediate response. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get back to you.
Okay, we have 4 minutes, and I've got questions here, but I want to, go ahead, sorry. Union, just introduce yourself.
My name is Nathan Anderson. I work for Union Pacific Railroad. Our office is in the Pioneer Park neighborhood. You mentioned a couple of things before. I want to jump back, and you mentioned you don't want to be harsh, and I understand that. You want to be compassionate. You want to look for solutions as opposed to just rebuffing the problem and sending it somewhere else. I've had to be harsh with my kids and tell them, you can't come downtown. I don't want you coming downtown to have lunch with me on the tracks because I don't trust you getting off the tracks in that neighborhood right now. You've also, I hope I didn't misunderstand you, but you seem to say that the development in the area will bring more people to the area and more people moving around will help solve the problem. I'm hoping you can elaborate on that a little bit, because I don't think that the homeless and vagrant problem in the area becoming a smaller portion of the population actually addresses the problem.
So let me explain that a little bit, because we know this from looking at circumstances here as well as all across the country. One of the challenges we have around criminal activity in general is not enough eyes and ears. And so as we have a larger 24/7 population, there are more people out on the streets who are providing the eyes and ears for our law enforcement and for other services. And there are great case studies, I won't go into them, around the country about what a huge difference it makes, particularly in park areas and in troubled areas, when the activity level increases, when people who are not involved either in criminal activity or vagrant types of activities start living in and using the area. And we have seen that to a certain extent even around Pioneer Park itself. When I came into office, Pioneer Park was the problem spot. And I was shocked to hear from some of our law enforcement folks that it was almost sort of a hands-off area. And I thought, here we have the largest park in downtown Salt Lake, and people who aren't involved in criminal activity can't even feel comfortable walking in. So we actually got the whole neighborhood together. It was a Salt Lake Solutions effort with all of our agencies together, and talked about what we could do to change Pioneer Park. And they came up with a series of solutions. And today, Pioneer Park itself is relatively safe compared to 8 years ago when I came into office. And it's a mix of things. Some of it is we put cameras in the park, and law enforcement cameras, which makes a huge difference. And you need to do that sparingly for a variety of reasons. The main thing we did was we increased the activities in the park. So the Twilight Series coming down, the expansion of Farmers Market. We started getting businesses around the area to use the park for activities like walking and running during the day and having their lunches in the park. There are a whole mix of things we did, and it has helped change the the ability for people to be able to use and enjoy the park. Now, we're not there yet. I'm not suggesting we are. But compared to where we were when I came into office, it certainly has made a difference. So there are a variety of things that can be done, and we welcome your ideas on other things that we can be doing. And we are, we've just, actually last night, I don't know, Wednesday? Yeah, last night, the City Council just took a recommendation for us to put more money now into some of the improvements in Pioneer Park that we think is going to help it. So it's a mix of things that really works. And I'm not saying that having more people there who aren't involved in nefarious activities does it alone, but it really helps. And I'll speak as someone who lived in Memory Grove for 25 years. The first 6 or 8 years that I lived there, I wouldn't let my kids go up in the park, and I lived right next to it. Okay? We had the fortune of the floods of '83, which we didn't feel was a fortune at the time, but we used that as an opportunity to completely reconfigure the use of the park and the way you get in and out of the park, so you can only walk into the park now unless you're going to Memorial House. And today, it is flooded with people doing all kinds of things, whereas before it had just been really a sort of a crime hotbed, which is really unfortunate.
Time for a comment. Tiffany, do you have one? I didn't know.
No, I was just going to comment that I've been across the street all 8 years. And 8 years ago, I could leave my front door open. 8 years ago, I could walk my dog in the park. I cannot do any of those things.
I agree.
Really? Because I walk through that park all the time. I mean, I do it intentionally, just day and night.
You don't want your animal or your child walking through there or touching anything, because it's not even so much crime. It is crime, but it's a health hazard.
Yeah. Any other questions? Because I've got these three, and I'll read them fast. This one is from Dusty Harris, and he says, on behalf of the owners of the Gateway office buildings, that we have serious concerns about not only unsafe environment for the tenants, but also what appears to be a perilous conditions for the city's homeless. Status quo is not only bad for the city's progress and economy, but also for the homeless people. Will you support moving the shelter if that's what the commission comes up with?
Yes.
Okay. The second question I have here is, do you support an ordinance, a loitering law? It can't be a law, it's got to be an ordinance. A loitering ordinance on 5th West where they are camping out. Do you support a loitering ordinance?
We've looked at a whole variety of ordinances in the city. In fact, I proposed some ordinances around panhandling shortly after coming into office, working with the Downtown Alliance and others, and the City Council has been very reluctant to restrict uses in any sort of public way or right-of-way. I will also say that very recent Supreme Court decisions, the way they're being interpreted by our city attorney, by other attorneys around the country, really put great limitations on how we can restrict activities in the public right-of-way. So I'm not opposed to trying things that'll work, but we're obviously going to have to be within the bounds of the Constitution and the law.
Sure. The last one is, there's an attempt to, and this, I wish Representative Nelson was here because I think he ran this bill to end panhandling. Can the city and the state come together to have a panhandling initiative that will end panhandling?
The short answer is no. There is a very clear First Amendment constitutional right for people to panhandle. It's been recognized by the Supreme Court in a very definitive way. What we were trying to get a handle on through the aggressive panhandling ordinance wasn't the person who has the right when they're on the street to ask you for money, but where it's the behavior or activity that is really threatening to people. And a number of years ago, we weren't able to get our city council to adopt it. I mean, I proposed it, and the council took it up, and it didn't pass. We have members of the city council working with us today to try to bring something back. There is a renewed concern, though, under a recent Supreme Court decision that it may be difficult to adopt it, and that ordinances that are like the one we are looking at around the country may not stand the test of a judicial challenge.
So the last question Rather than bicycle patches, what is your comprehensive vision to resolve the homeless problem, and are you willing to publish that vision and framework before the election so that the constituents can hold you to it? Given the plan has flexibility to incorporate the recommendation of the commission.
Yeah, I think I've been very clear on that from the time we established the commission at the beginning of this year and started working on it last year to get it all set up. I am committed to carrying out the product, the recommendations of the commission. And I think you'll find that the city council that's been very involved shares that. The business community shares that. And we have, in our discussions as recently, and I know you are meeting shortly after with legislative leadership up here, are committed to helping us do that from the state level. So I know it takes an incredible amount of patience for all of you, and I can tell you for me, and for so many of us in the city and those of us who are working on these issues literally day in and day out, to deal with the consequences and impacts of what's become a just unacceptable situation for people who live and work and visit this area. It's very uncomfortable, and it's beyond that for a lot of folks. And as I said at the beginning, if this were an easy issue, I can tell you every city in the country who's facing this wouldn't be looking to each other to try to figure out what the best practices were and what could work. And I'm not using that as an excuse, I'm just saying this is a very challenging, complex issue. And we have to both deal with the short-term effects and come up with a long-term approach. And I think the way we are now addressing it is going to give us the long-term solutions, which is really ultimately what we need. And allow us to be successful. And as you said, Scott, at the last meeting that we had of our Facilities Commission, our City Commission, we have a chance to actually be a model because of the way we're going about this and because of the generosity and commitments in this community to be a model for the rest of the country. Because every city, I can tell you, is facing these same issues. And nobody has easy answers. People have partial answers. People have things that may be working that address a portion of the population, and these are 9 different subpopulations. But no one right now has an answer, and it's for a whole variety of reasons that just relate to the complexity of what we're trying to address.
Madam Rector, this is you have 30 seconds to tell us all why we should vote for you. Maybe it'll only take 5.
Well, I would hope that what you look for in a mayor and as a leader of this city, of someone who takes the time, has not just the commitment, but the approach to addressing issues that allow us to be successful. And you said 30 seconds?
Yeah, I've kind of. Oh, yeah.
And the approach that I've taken around homelessness, which without question is not the success we want it to be and it will be, is the approach for us to be successful. And that's convening everyone around the table, getting our best expertise and resources together to come into a common solution. And we're on the path to do that. So whether it's homelessness or anything else that's important to you in the city, I hope you'll appreciate the incredible momentum we've built in this city, and will support me in my re-election. So thank you.
Let's all give a round. Jackie, and Jackie, if you'll take 1 minute to kind of give an overview, and then we'll jump right into questions. And I have questions that people have texted in already.
Okay.
Welcome, Jackie, discussion, please.
Thank you. We're a little behind, and I have something I need to be to before my next debate even. So I have to leave by 5, so please bear with me, I'll do a real short intro. For those of you who do not know me, I served in the Utah legislature for 13 years. And while I was up here, I served on the Economic Development Appropriations Committee the entire time I was here. I served on Business Labor Standing Committee. I served on the International Trade Commission. I served on the Rules Committee. I was in leadership for a little window of time there, and I did Health and Human Services. I did Workforce Services. I was on Natural Resources. I pretty much did it all. But the majority of the time I was up here, I spent on business-related issues and trying to help make sure that our economy was very strong. And I think we did a pretty good job based on how we survived the downturn in the economy. So I am running for Salt Lake City Mayor because I believe we have significant issues that need to be addressed, this being one of the biggest ones. And so I am very anxious to take your questions and have a chance to have some real dialogue around this issue and what it means for me as a leader to be able to participate and help. For those of you who don't know, I've been working for the sheriff for the last 8 years, and I'm a project manager for him. And being a project manager versus a planner are very different roles, and it takes true leadership and the ability to keep people at the table and the ability to move people from a very hard positioned place to compromise. And it's a skill set that I think will be extremely helpful as we move forward in trying to create a much better solution than what we have today for our homeless population, but also for the business community here and the people who come to visit, the people who live in our city. We know that the crime that is infiltrating our homeless population is also out of control, and we as a community can do better. I know everybody's committed to doing better, and there's no doubt that as we move forward, even through a transition, should I win this race, that nothing will just stop, that I will be there to make sure come November that we are constantly focused on this issue, and I'm not concerned about the transition window at all. I'm very committed to this issue and making sure that we don't have any delays in moving forward. So I'm happy to take questions. Scott, do you want to ask some first?
Well, I think, Jackie, they're not shy, I'll tell you that. I've learned that. So who would like to start off this first time? Richard, do you want to? Richard is probably the longest business owner in the Rio Grande area. And was it 1938, if I remember? 1930, his family has had that business in there. So Richard, why don't you start? It's called Electric. Thomas Electric.
Yeah. Do you believe that the Station Center project can go forward in the current environment?
No. Our current environment is not conducive to anything being successful. I really firmly believe that. Part of that being, we have a lot of issues in this current situation that are very prohibitive of the ability for you and any new project to be successful. The drug trafficking, the violence that's occurring, the aggressive panhandling, the use of our streets as a restroom. A lot of these are all barriers, and we absolutely have to do things in a different fashion than what we are doing today.
So Jackie, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds, 40 seconds each to answer each one, if that's okay.
Sure.
I'm not like Rod Decker, I'm really nice.
That's okay.
Keith Henderson, Rio Grande Cafe.
Recently, in the context of crime and punishment, let's say, the local police officers on the beat have educated me about some recent developments here in Utah. Number one, the legislature recently lowered, for instance, heroin possession from a felony to a misdemeanor. And simultaneously, Sheriff Winder is eliminating jail beds by about 125 in the most recent reduction in jail space. What are your views as far as how that will bring us a positive result in regards to cleaning up the crime on Grand Street?
Well, you know, what we keep doing is certainly not working. We have to be much more strategic in our law enforcement effort. Part of what goes on in our community, for those of you who don't know, we have multiple law enforcement agencies in the county, and they do not naturally share information. In fact, the information is only shared if the agencies come together and say, we really need to work together. Like there has to be a very concerted effort. What I would say to you under my leadership, I would make sure that we are working in tandem with the Unified Police Department and sharing information with their narcotics unit so that we can get to the source of where these drugs are coming from to begin with. We do know, at least in the Sheriff's Office, that there are 3 entities that are providing drugs, and I don't know what Salt Lake City PD knows exactly. But what I do know is that when agencies come together and share information and they create a very strategic operation to crack down on a specific crime, that we are hugely successful in those efforts. And that needs to happen on this drug issue for sure.
Great. Yes. Well, Matt, let's go with you.
Cool, thanks. Let's stay on this same topic here then. Sure. Matt Mateus from SpyHop, so 5th West and 2nd South. We've been encouraged by the increased presence of officers in the area for kind of looking over our area and the young people that we serve. But I get the impression that you may look to change that or decrease the presence. Could you speak to that?
Not necessarily decrease, but we do have to look at what's happening because what's good for you is not been good for Sugar House. So what we're finding now is there's a lot of drug traffic right now in Fairmount Park and Sugar House Park. So we're driving that effort from downtown into another part of our community.
So could you talk a little bit about what strategy you would
Well,
use?
and again, I think going back to this is we have to get to the source of where these drugs are coming from to begin with and put a chokehold on that. And if we don't ever turn the faucet off, we'll never be able to arrest our way out of this. You'll never have enough cops. You'll never, be able to protect your neighborhood and Sugar House and Main Street, where all of this activity goes on. There won't ever be enough cops. You've got to take the drugs off the street. That is the only way to do this.
How are you going to do that?
Because we'll get to the sources, and our two narcotics units, the UPD and Salt Lake City PD, are the 2 largest law enforcement agencies. And if they start sharing information and create a strategic plan to get to those drug dealers, not just the dealers, but the suppliers, we can cut this off. We've done it in other parts of this city. You've probably seen some of the stories in the news of these major drug busts that have gone on over the last couple of years. And those don't just happen. They happen because information starts getting shared and we're working very strategically. But we have to want to do it. And that's a different issue. People have to come together. I don't know if you remember, there were women being attacked at ATMs. Do you remember this? And finally, a woman was murdered in Fairmount Park, in the bathroom there. And it wasn't until that happened that the cops decided to start talking to each other. And in 30 days, we caught that man, after him being out there for a year.
So can the mayor make the organization share?
That's the beauty of being a mayor in a city with an appointed chief, is you can work directly with that chief on what you think operations could look like. I'm not going to control operations, but we certainly could have serious dialogue around what I think we need to try differently than what we're doing today.
Thank you.
It's really been addressed, my question.
Okay, great. Robert.
Thank you.
Who are you supporting, by the way?
Bernie. He's supporting Bernie.
Yeah, Bernie.
During the Great Depression.
I did not ask for that. Yeah.
I pray for it every night.
Okay.
During the Great Depression,
okay,
the United States of America saw homelessness as a national problem under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, president. Now, do you foresee any time we might get to enough cooperation between city, county, and state that everyone says, and maybe the nation, that we can start looking at things like the WPA and the CCC? Everyone's talking about services to the homeless, but these are human beings that want to work just as badly as each one of you. They want the dignity of a job.
They do.
Any hope for...
Without a doubt, even the service providers here, I think, would agree that we have the attention of the state and the city and the county. Everybody is looking at this and is very interested in creating an effective model. And I think there's no one in this room that doesn't think we need to find some sort of transitional housing, rapid rehousing opportunities, because it is the housing piece that helps create the stability, that helps move people towards independence, especially if they have intensive case management to help them get back there.
And employment.
Yeah, and that's part of it. That's part of the case management, is the employment or whatever else maybe brought you through the doors to begin with.
I know there's a question back here and I missed it earlier. Cassandra, did you want to ask? Okay. Yes, John.
They've, of course, been spending a lot of time on this commission that will come up with a recommendation at the end of the year. If you're elected mayor, are you going to follow that recommendation even though it's made breakfast? And if so, are you also willing to move to the
You know, obviously it's not solely my decision to move facilities. The recommendations that come out of that study, I think, need to be carried forward, but we also have to consider what the county is looking at, what the Pioneer Park Coalition is looking at, because no matter what, we have to move together. We have to move forward together. And the other piece to this is I met with the owner of the property where the road home is. And I asked him, I said, are you willing to move the shelter? And he said, I am not going to move the shelter for moving's sake. It has to come with a solution. If moving it is part of the solution and the solution is data-driven and can create different results than we're seeing today, then I would look at that. But he has to be at the table. And we have to make sure that we present something that is meaningful to him in order for him to move forward. And that's a big piece of this. And, you know, again, I will say to you, though, I am very willing to work through all of this, because at the core of who I am is a desire to affect change. That's why I run for office. That's why I ran in the 90s. And we absolutely can do better than we're doing today. It's not because people aren't doing their jobs. They are doing their jobs. But we need to look at this in a different way than we ever have before. And I know I can bring that kind of vision and that ability to help people put down their guard and say, okay. You know, when I came in and I came to work for the sheriff, one of the first things we did is we looked at our processes, right? We had 1,500 employees back then. We have 3 different departments, and we looked through all of our processes, and we had employees who'd been there for 30 years saying, we aren't changing a thing. But when it was all said and done, we changed our processes, we streamlined, we cut costs, we saved $14 million doing it, and our employers are happier, our service is better, we've streamlined. All of that needs to be part of this. We have to be able to say, let's look at everything. Let's look at everything and have the ability to say, we can probably be more efficient here or more effective here if we do it this way or that way.
All right, let's have a question on hospice care.
Well, I have actually a different question.
Oh.
I'm going to ask a question on behalf of my friend and architect, Tim Milo, who has been working on a solution that will be a comprehensive homelessness services corridor on the old fleet block that is currently vacant Salt Lake City property that actually has buildings that could be utilized today for emergency shelter and transitional housing. And I was wondering if you were aware of the solution and if
Sure. It is definitely outside of the commission's scope because it includes housing. I have not seen or heard this. But what I will also say to you is this is not a Salt Lake City problem. This problem comes to our city because we raised our hand years ago and said people matter and we need to help the homeless, right? But what we are finding is that our city and our county should not be the only ones at the table providing services and ponying up money, and we're at our capacity at the county. If we don't bring in other counties to help with services like health and human services, right? Addiction, mental illness, right? If we don't bring in these other counties, we will have similar problems. We won't be able to really move this ball as well as we would like to and that we need to for our city. Other counties have to be brought to the table because if we say, we're done, we're not going to offer services anymore in Salt Lake City, everybody's going to go somewhere. And all those other somewheres need to be at the table. That's reality. And I will help bring them.
Yes, Derek.
Yeah, I guess I want to go back to the communication question earlier, where you were talking about Salt Lake PD unified and getting them to communicate. It's always been an issue in law enforcement, but I kind of feel that, and I've talked about this earlier, communication with private security, Homeland Security, or Homeland has identified private security as the front line for security for the nation. Yet the communication between private security and law enforcement agencies is non-existent.
Right.
If you were mayor, how would you implement a program, or would you implement a program that would actually address this issue where there's communication between, say, Salt Lake Police and private security?
You know, it's a good question, and I don't know if there are barriers to sharing information with those who are not sworn to uphold the law. And that's probably where the communication stops, is the sharing of intelligence at that level.
Legal issue with sharing information, but I do think there may be some psychological barriers that just have always been.
Right. It's not something I'm familiar with. I know, you know, I know kind of why we aren't sharing amongst agencies. I was a victim of a crime that happened in multiple jurisdictions and nobody investigated, and I was completely frustrated and said, what is going on? But I do know that we can do things differently than we have been when it comes to the criminal activity in our city, and I'm fairly confident that we will be doing things differently.
So, Kathy, we haven't heard from any service providers. Would you like to ask a question? I know we have a few representatives here. Do you have a question?
Come back to me in a minute, I'll think it.
Yes, Stephanie.
Going back to your conversation with the owner of the road home, does that person feel they have a problem? Like, I'm curious what, you know, they're saying they'll move if there's data. Like, what's that person's perspective on what's
Very
going on?
concerned, for sure, and has been involved for 30 years. Has never walked away, right? And is very committed to this day to helping our homeless, without a doubt. And I am confident that as we work together and create a solution, that that person will be at the table and will pour over the recommendations coming from all the work that's getting done. I don't see a barrier there. I see somebody saying, give me cause, that is not just about a business, but is also about the homeless.
I'd like to give you a cause that's about the homeless today, and thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Today when I read the Utah study for sex offenders, and we talked about barrier code before you came, etc. The listing shows in the top 12 that I sampled, and 50 of those live at the road home, that 13 of those, I think 13 is what I said, are sexual predators. So there is a real cause. Children have lived in that mixed facility for perhaps 30 years.
Right.
And seen and witnessed mind-numbing abuse that changes their brain architecture, their epigenetic markers, etc. That is caused.
It is caused.
So what can you do to immediately stop
Right.
that?
Well, I think our biggest thing on this particular issue is we need to enforce the barrier laws to begin with. We're not the only shelter in Utah. And the other thing is we absolutely have to divide this population up. That families with children need to be in a separate facility. And in my opinion, because kids need stability to be successful in school, we need to find them housing. Whether it's short-term housing or long-term housing, we need to get these kids in housing to make sure that they have the greatest opportunity to be successful. And then work with their families to help them get back to an independent life. But the kids are the priority for me. It's what's driving me the most is, you know, I know how precious all of the things you're saying are real, how precious those developmental years are and the impacts they have on children, and what kids are witnessing and experiencing, most of us never have experienced in our lifetime.
And then I'd like to complicate that, and especially for VOA, with human trafficking, sex trafficking of youth. And I am absolutely certain that some of the young women and men that end up in the new shelter are victims of sex trafficking. And so I would ask that there be unanimous support from your office, if you're elected, for the effort that's going to have to be made in an at-risk neighborhood to begin with. It's only 4 blocks from this concentrated problem. So we've got human trafficking, we've got barrier codes, we've got abuse and neglect that's happening on a massive scale of our young children, and everyone in this room needs to stand up and make this stop today, because we're talking about child ruination and urban abandonment.
Yeah, it's extremely serious, and the new facility that has been created, in part was created because of work I did on Capitol Hill to help move that ball forward so that we could get a facility for our youth. The other thing here, though, with all that we're talking about with the youth is our city is in a very peculiar position. We are at the crux of I-80 and I-15. And because of that, we have drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, and human trafficking coming through here on a regular basis. And all the more reason for us to share information because it's happening in our city. And once we start sharing information, it will be much easier for us to crack down on all those very horrific crimes going on right here in our neighborhood. And we need to be doing that.
What can you do from the sheriff's office today where you're employed to start that information sharing? When those are dropped today, what can you do?
You know, it takes a will on the part of Salt Lake City PD as well, and I don't have the ear of the chief right now. The sheriff is very interested in that partnership and the sharing of information and has come to the table, even met with Mayor Becker to say, Mayor, let's work together on the drug trafficking this summer. So this was back in like May, and presented a plan and said, look, if we work together and we start doing this, here's what I think we can do, and we would do some undercover stuff. And he had this very elaborate plan, and he said, I hope you don't mind. I'm trying to help the sheriff with the drug problem. I said, I don't mind, go do it. You know, we need to get this done. And then the mayor turned him down. And that's when they did the, sweep, which brings people to the jail where there is no room, and they cycle through, and it doesn't work.
So if information started just to flow, if information started to flow from the sheriff's office, it would be turned down, or is
the
it
sheriff offered?
Please don't share us information.
The sheriff offered his narcotics unit for months this summer to work on the drug issue, and was turned down. its effect.
Why do they say no? I'm just curious. Is there like...
I don't know, because when he left, he thought that they were going to move ahead on it. And then they did the sweep like a week later, ended up doing something completely different. So.
Yes, Kathy.
Oh, thanks for coming back to me.
Sure.
So, hi, Jackie. Good
Hi.
to see you. As we look at the possibilities around sites for homeless services and collective impact, some of the concerns that come up in our meetings have to do with zoning and funding.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be great to hear your opinion and approach. What kind of strategies might come to mind around zoning if we were to split into multiple locations?
Mm-hmm.
And how are we going to fund this? Do you think that's as much of a concern as I do?
Yes, there's no doubt. I've had multiple conversations with the speaker about this, and there is a commitment at the state level to really help. And that commitment, I think, needs to be a housing piece, an element to this. We probably won't be able to just all of a sudden build units everywhere and house nearly 1,000 people. That's not likely, and I'm not going to make that promise today. But what we could do is move forward with a pilot project and get the kids out of there first into a housing unit, and then move forward with that whole process of doing assessment and finding out why somebody ended up homeless to begin with. One of our bigger problems, and if there's developers in here, I hope you're listening, because oftentimes what happens is we don't have enough low-income housing for people to get into. And then, so they're in housing they can barely afford, then they have a crisis, then they end up homeless because there's not enough low-income housing. And we absolutely have to build more low-income housing. That needs to be a part of this solution. It just does. We have to create the model, the working model for us to operate from. And I've been working with a local nonprofit about a model that I think would be very useful in this system. But it's a model, and it needs to be poured over by everybody who's at the table at some point. But in that model is assessment. It is, within it, there is housing, short-term housing, long-term housing, depending on the need of the family. There is intensive case management. There is a real opportunity for people to get the medical care they need if they have mental illness. And again, you can't do all this in one county because you cannot keep taxing one department. We have to bring in other partners in order for us to find the resources we need for the services and so on. All of this, I think, needs to be on a transit line so that if people need to get to the clinic, the 4th Street Clinic, that they have access to get there. And we need to be very mindful in making sure that if people show up at a shelter, that they get immediate assessment on why are you here to begin with, that happens. We're not going to be able to solve this for every homeless person. That won't happen either. We know that. There will always be people who choose to live on our streets for any number of reasons. But we can certainly, I think, partner with the state at a level that we maybe have not seen before. And I think that's a very key element to a potential ongoing resource for additional.
Question earlier. Did I ignore it? I'm so sorry.
Actually, my question was, where is that corridor?
Flick corridor.
Kathy doesn't like this because it's
Yeah.
by her.
It's where they used to have the buses, all the transit
right.
for something. So we have listened to, we know about Ken Miles.
I've got.
They've got, I know.
Okay.
And that's flux fast.
Okay, thanks.
How would you respond to Glenn Bailey's proposal of the $30 million general bond to build transitional housing just in Salt Lake City then?
Well,
It is a
right.
it is a statewide problem, and he's a service provider.
You know, all the options need to be on the table, but again, I'll go back to saying I don't believe that all of this needs to be done in Salt Lake City. I just do not believe that. We already have 40 service providers. And for us to say this all needs to be in Salt Lake for whatever reason, I think cuts off opportunities and options, and we should leave all options on the table for funding, all options on the table for assistance and service. They all need to stay on the table. Bonding may have to happen, but I would prefer it happened at the state level, quite honestly.
So we have 4 minutes. Who else has a question? Then I'll read the ones. I keep getting text. Jason, do you have?
No, I just think you should read. You have good questions.
Yeah.
You should read your questions.
That's because you said it.
I did not. If I had a question, I'd just
Jason
ask
Mattis, let me read this. If given the opportunity, let's see here, let me just read it. As the owner of the Gateway office buildings, that we have serious concerns about not only an unsafe environment for our tenants, but also what appears to be perilous conditions for the city's homeless. Status quo is not only bad for the city's programs and economy, but also for the homeless people. What is your commitment to remove the road home, change the management, and then he said something else I can't, it doesn't make sense.
Well, I think I answered the first question is, you know, if the owner of the property is willing to move, I would support that effort. But again, it will come from him, you know, because we presented a real solution. Gateway, the problem with Gateway and what's happening down there, I really believe if we divide this population up and create some temporary housing and help people get to independence again, the drug dealers can't hide amongst the population anymore. You will find that the aggressive panhandlers can't hide amongst the population anymore. And we have, you know, these laws in place right now for aggressive panhandlers that we are not enforcing, and in part because of what goes on in the jail. And we would again look at this in a very strategic fashion on how do you really crack down on this, because it's become a business in this community, and we know that the majority of these aggressive panhandlers are not homeless. We know this.
So I think we got that. Rather than bicycle patches, what is your comprehensive vision to resolve the homeless problem? And are you willing to publish that vision framework before the election so that the constituents can hold you to it? Given that plan has flexibility to incorporate the recommendations of the commission.
Right. And we will be posting a homeless and housing plan this week for people to consume and pour over and get back to me with your thoughts on it.
Do you support, they say law, loitering law, but it's an ordinance, you have to have an ordinance, it's in the city. Do you support an loitering law, ordinance?
I'm not sure. What I would support is that we look at so over the last few years, I don't remember when exactly it was, we had a no camping in the city limits thing, and that was repealed. And I think that's created some of the problems we see down at ABC right now, and 5th South and 6th South, and I don't think it's appropriate that we just allow camping on our streets when we don't have public restrooms. We're creating a very hazardous, not disease-free environment because of it, and we need to be much more mindful about that.
And be mindful of your time. The last question is, and you have 30 seconds to answer it, why should we vote for you?
Well, I got to tell you, I am not one tired person. I'm like an Energizer bunny, and you know, I am very committed to this community. I have been for a very long time. I believe that my ability as a project manager is very helpful for the bigger issues we are facing today. You know, our transportation, our air quality, our homeless, our housing, all of those big issues that really have been pushed aside for too many years, and now we're kind of reaching this crescendo of desperation, criminal activity, all of it. And these are all things that leaves town a lot. I'm the kind of person that's at my desk, and I'll be there working very hard every day for you until we fix these problems.
So I just want to be really quick, but I'm Derek Kitchen, and I'm running for Salt Lake City Council District 4, which is downtown, the urban core, and the neighborhoods just below the University of Utah. I'm running because I love Salt Lake City. I on 4th West. I'm right next to the VOA's new Youth Resource Center, which we're really excited about. And we were there to support them, not only as a business, but as residents. Anyway, I will just punt 2 questions because I'm in a time crunch, but give me what you got. I'm eager to talk about homelessness.
I live and work in the district. I'm with the Utah System Higher Education Board of Regents, so our office is at Gateway. And I live on 5th East and South Temple. So it's like near my home, kind of homeless didn't used to be a problem, but now recently in the last few months, a lot of people have kind of moved into the area, kind of camping out in office buildings. And you know, it's like many of my neighbors feel unsafe in the neighborhood, as many of the people who work in my office building feel unsafe. I mean, how would you, what would you advise people, as a council member? What would, if you were me, what would you tell them about their safety in where they work or where they live?
Did you say people are sleeping in offices?
No, in parking structures,
okay.
Around the office buildings and places.
Yeah, the Broadway Park Lofts, in a condo complex right next to Pioneer Park, I know the residents there are very upset because they have the same issue where people are sleeping in their parking garage. It's very clearly a problem, and a lot of people don't feel safe living there, working there, or investing in the neighborhood. I know that's a big concern. I do trust the partners that we pulled together for the commissions. I really am eager to see what they present to us. But more importantly, I think we need to focus on separating the drugs from the homelessness. I think that if we can really focus on keeping the people who need services and are truly homeless away from the element of crime, we can go a long way. Obviously, we have issues with housing that need to be addressed, and I think I do support Jackie's idea of disbursement, and I hope that that's part of the recommendation that comes forward. As Clotilde mentioned earlier, we have a serious issue with children and barrier laws not being enforced. Before the commission comes out with their recommendation, I think it's essential that we move the families, children and families, away from the shelter. Maybe to the Midvale shelter. Once that's finally completed, maybe we just pull the trigger and build a family shelter that resembles more of an apartment building than, a big gym or a big, I don't know. I think that there's a lot we can do, and I'm definitely on board with, the recommendations from all the people who are sitting at the table right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You've probably heard my questions without everyone has asked, but I'm happy to ask them again because they keep saying so. And this one is, other than the bicycle patches, what's your comprehensive vision to resolve the homeless problem? Would you support relocating the road home? And would you publish to your constituents what you would want to do and your vision of the homeless? So would you, I guess the first question, would you support relocating?
It's very clear that we need to rebuild the shelter. It's at capacity. I don't think people should be sleeping in the hallways or in the offices. It was built for 30 families, and we're well past, I think, 1,000 people now per night. That's unacceptable. No matter what happens, whether we keep it on site or we rebuild elsewhere in the county, I think that it's essential that we rebuild the shelter. So I am in favor of rebuilding it. The location is less important to me as to how we care for the population and how we fold them back into our society more comprehensively. But yeah, I mean, if the best solution is to move it, then I'm away from the Rio Grande neighborhood, then definitely.
Okay, and then this is, again, from the Gateway, the manager of the Gateway, Dusty Harris. He says, on behalf of the owner of the Gateway buildings, we have serious concerns about not only unsafe environment for our tenants, but also what appears to be perilous conditions for the city's homelessness. What's your commitment to ensure that businesses are safe, and how do we keep the he asked about the homeless population out of that, but I'm not going to ask.
Well, I think security is a big part of this, and that goes to your question as well. You know, having the increased bike patrols and foot patrols over there near the Metro Bureau, I think has had an impact in the neighborhood, and so if we can keep the pressure on there, in addition to adding caseworkers, case management, and other security resources, I think we can make a big impact long term, not only for the residents of the road home and the people that live in the neighborhood, but the businesses that operate there as well.
Do you support an anti-loitering law?
That's tricky. I think
it's an ordinance, it's not a law.
Right.
This person said law, but it's got to be an ordinance.
Yeah, I think we could come up with a Salt Lake solution, something that's unique to the situation we have and that addresses the very serious concerns of the neighborhood while also being within the realms of the Constitution. I definitely think we should be looking to best practices from around the country and mirroring those laws.
This goes right in hand in hand. Would you support a panhandling ordinance, state law, to end panhandling?
I definitely support cracking down on aggressive panhandling.
But do you support anti-panhandling? So
yes, as long as it's within the realms of the Constitution, I definitely support that.
Okay, got it. Richard, did you have a question? Oh yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so if you were elected, would you help the in-between houses for the homeless reword that zoning back to its original in the event that our temporary ordinance becomes permanent, so that we can actually use our full building and keep people through to the very end of life when they pass away?
Well, thanks for the work you're doing. That's really important, and I'm happy that you're filling that void in our community. So yes, I definitely support your work, and I would work with you to make sure that it's it's legal, to make sure that you're operating legally. So yes.
Stefan, you're a business owner. You're a business owner. Red Rock Brewing, they've had to hire their own security force. They pay taxes. Why does he have to do double taxation to stay safe with his business?
You shouldn't, and neither should SpyHop, for instance. So, you know, I think that obviously we need increased patrols citywide because Jackie's right. We are seeing an increase in crime and drug trafficking elsewhere in the city. But yeah, I think that the more resources we can put into security, the better. But I hope that that's coupled with case management as well, so that we can actually hold these folks' hands as we fold them back into our communities.
Okay, we have time for Derek, and then John, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, Derek.
John's here.
Derek, I heard you just earlier say that you're not so concerned about where the homeless shelter is placed. But I think that's one of the big issues. Wherever a shelter is placed, it affects those surrounding neighborhoods, the residents, as well as the businesses. And I think that's one of the big issues that we have today. What I'm concerned about and what I'm hearing is good ideas, but something that I think is missing in a lot of the plans, and that is, if you are creating a new shelter, is security measures and designs being looked at in these plans? And I'm talking about not just the physical security design, but actually the geographic areas as well, where you're placing this. Security for the individuals that use the resource, but also for these surrounding communities. Has any of that been considered, and would you consider that?
You know, I'm not entirely sure if they have been considered. I'm not at the table right now. I will be, hopefully, come January, but design is incredibly important, and location does matter to the degree that we can have the folks placed in an area that's accessible to the services that they need on a day-to-day basis. So in that regards, location does matter. I think that what's important is that we, like I mentioned earlier, best practices from around the country. I think a campus model really would be good for our community, where you have access to, mental health, substance abuse treatment, DMV, job training, things of that nature, and something that's secured as well, something that's not open to the public, where people don't have to wait in line outside on the sidewalk to get in, for instance. There's a number of issues that need to be addressed with the current situation that I'd like to see fixed going forward. But if it ends up staying, in the vicinity of downtown, it's not as important to me as treating them right and making sure that we build a facility that's secure and safe. That's essentially it, yeah.
Scott, can you tell a little bit, and Derek may or may not know about this, the differences you've seen in the Provo operation?
Oh, sure.
And would you invite Derek or maybe any of us?
Sure.
To come and see why that does work?
Real quick, Food and Care is not an emergency shelter, but it's a shelter in Provo. And their whole concepts are based upon responsibility. So when you go down there and you walk in, they do an assessment the second you walk in, and then if you want to stay there that night, you sign an agreement that the next morning you'd be willing to do a task to pay for that experience. And it's not paid for. They have tasks like, will you help in the kitchen? Will you clean this? Will you take this out? They have a beauty salon there where they give men and women hair. And to do that, you have to be willing to spend like 30 minutes out in the garden or something like that. And it's really I think you've been down there. Am I describing it right? Yeah, and then they have a laundry facility, and it's all based upon there's personal responsibility of what you give back, and that's what
no
it is.
queuing?
Oh, they won't allow queuing. And then in the back, and you said this was interesting, they have a fenced-in community where they have, smoking corridor, and then they have activities. I mean, they have activities down there where you do pottering, and there's a whole bunch of plethora of things. But they're contained in the back where the drug dealers can't come in through the front. They don't have access to it. And they do not allow queuing. When you go in there, you can sign up and then you can go in. And there's no queuing to get things.
And irresponsible conduct like aggressive panhandling warrants.
This is really interesting. They have people that go out in the cars, and if they get a call, let's say Camille calls and said, hey, there's a panhandler over here, they'll call it what's the name of it? Food and Care, sorry. They'll call them, and they actually send people out, and they'll go out on the street and they'll say, Camille, you were panhandling out here, you can't stay here tonight. This is going to be a warning, we'll give you a warning, but you have all your needs here, and we've given you a job opportunity. They send people out. And Provo City knows that if you see this person panhandling, call Food and Care, and they send people out, and they'll go confront them. They'll say, Pete, I'm telling you, you can't come back in tonight. They give them a fair warning. It's a really interesting concept. Brent Crane is the owner, and I'll send out his contact information.
Is it a nonprofit or government?
Nonprofit. Yeah. Yes?
And I understand you've got time commitments. I just have a couple of questions. That you, as well as Mayor Becker and Representative Skoski, all brought up the issue of more services, more buildings. So kind of two-part question. Number one, do we have a good handle, does anyone have a good handle on what percentage of the population needs workforce services versus, say, mental health and substance abuse services? And then as a secondary question, have we at any time said, here's what the budget ought to be to address the problem? And I didn't ask either of the other two that because it just kind of coagulated just now.
I don't have the demographic information right now. Does anybody else have that, Liz?
Well, I can tell you how much we spend on homeless services annually. We spend $51 million, and that's how much flows through the county. And if I had $51 million, I promise you, this would be solved. Give me half of it, and I would have it solved. Now, I shouldn't be expressing my opinion because he's the candidate. But you kind of triggered me off there because it just boils my blood. That $51 million. So does that help?
That does help, yeah, but I don't have that answer, unfortunately.
Who has the demographics for that?
We have almost all that information. And the HIMA system, the homeless management information, Kathy and Elizabeth, they could get, actually you could get the information from Elizabeth. I mean, we're all in the data collecting mode right now. Collective impact is probably the best.
We have the information and we haven't done the updated budgets yet. And part of that 50 million certainly helps maintain hundreds of households in the existing housing.
Yeah, housing, mental health services, physical, I mean, it's just a left road.
And we're looking to streamline and to do the best we can. But we haven't run any new numbers yet.
So,
it's too early.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just saying, we're not there yet.
Yeah. So, these people got their ballots today. I got mine today. And your name's probably going to be on, it's on the ballot. Wow, is that scary, isn't it? So, why should they put a dot by your name? 30 seconds.
Okay, I'll make this quick. Actually, I don't need this. Well, I will say that, you know, this is my first time running for a political office. I'm really energized by, you know, what I've accomplished the last couple of years. I love this city, and I'm really excited to get my hands dirty and see how I can make a difference elsewhere. As a business owner, I think I will bring insight to City Council that doesn't exist right now that I think is missing. And that will really add value to our community long term, especially in this period of unprecedented growth. And so I really hope that you can put your confidence in me to not only listen to you, but to work hard and to pull as many folks together and be a good collaborator on City Council. I think one thing that I've learned the last couple of years is to build bridges with people, even those who are on the opposite side of an issue with you. And I've had great success there, and I'm looking forward to doing that on council and elsewhere in the community. So whether I win or lose, I'm going to continue to invest in Salt Lake. I'm going to continue to work here and love this city and participate to the best of my ability. But I hope you will give me the opportunity to serve on council for the next 4 years. So thank you.
Thank you. John's got the best hummus in the world. And if you ever go down to the market on Saturday and Tuesday, do you do it Tuesday too?
Not this year.
Okay. It is absolutely the best hummus ever. So you got our vote for that. So thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll be real quick. We'll grab the other candidate, and then we serves in the Salt Lake Community Council. He was the Hispanic Caucus leader in the Democratic Party. He works at United Way and is very familiar with Pay for Success. So we apologize. And if you want to take 1 minute to kind of introduce yourself, and then fair game on the questions.
Certainly.
Okay. And thank you so much for coming.
Oh, not a problem.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, Nate. You bet.
So my name's Nate Salazar. I'm running for Salt Lake City Council District 4. It's been something I've wanted to do since I was a kid. You know, I grew up in District 4 on 7th South and 12th East. Went to Bryant Junior High School. I went to East High School. I've seen the district grow and evolve over time. I spent a lot of time at the Coffee Garden, spent a lot of time at Sugar House, at Blue Cats. So I'm very familiar with Salt Lake City and what it means to actually be a representative. I remember knocking on doors for Dave Jones when I was a kid. Hopefully all of you know Dave. He's a great guy. He's been a mentor of mine for a number of years. Pete Suazo, Archie Archuleta, these guys had huge, profound impacts on my life, not only as an individual, but as somebody that's interested in public service and what it means to be a steward of everything that goes on in a city and everything that goes on in a community and a neighborhood. I've taken that stewardship and that responsibility that I feel towards service and applied it to my everyday life, to my education. I have my bachelor's and master's in social work, in community-based practice social work, and particularly working with youth who are at risk, and more specifically in that little pocket with incarcerated youth who are incarcerated. So I have a great sense and a great feeling of the importance of things like education, the importance of things like community-based practice, collective impact, things that create sustainable outcomes to social issues. Not only I'm on the Salt Lake City Library Board of Directors. I'll give a shout out to John. Thanks for being here. You know, and like Scott mentioned, my other leadership opportunities. I'm also vice chair of the East Central Community Council, and I'm really compassionate, and I have a lot of heart and determination to make sure that we solve a lot of the key issues, especially homelessness. That's one of the #1 things that I'm working on. I couple that with education. Education and homelessness have to be what we focus on here in Salt Lake City in order to not only reduce the numbers that we see in our homeless population, but also help prevent it in the future. So that's what I'm all about. I would love to take your questions and hear what you got.
Pete, Rich, you guys are the business people down there, and he's going to be the guy that you're going to pick up the phone and say, you know what, if blah, blah, blah.
The homeless shelter on Rio Grande Street is right next door to my business. And it has generated a tremendous amount of difficulty for my business, for my staff. It's in my revenues are off in the neighborhood of 40%. And a number of years of a very consistent trend.
Yeah.
It's my belief that high-density homeless service providing homeless services in one area and commerce are incompatible, that they do not mix. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'd agree with you. You know, what we have going on right now where your business is located on Rio Grande Street there, it's not working. You know, there is no compatibility. The numbers are way too high to actually make sure that we can address the serious issues of the folks who are involved in homelessness. And not only the folks who are involved in homelessness, but folks who are business owners and residents down there as well. I completely agree that we need to reduce the number of homeless folks, but we also need to make sure that we're providing targeted services. And we can only provide target services through a triage approach, where we're taking the assessment of folks who are entering the services, asking them why they're here, you know, what worked in the past, why didn't it work, what do you need, you know, because you could have folks go down there who just need a month's rent, you know what I mean, they just got evicted. You know, you could have somebody that actually needs mental health services or drug rehabilitation. And we can't keep just providing targeted services, and I'm not saying that's the only thing that's going on, but in essence, I really feel like that lack of collaboration, couple that with making sure that folks have the specific services that they need, as opposed to just kind of stacking them in, you know, the shelter and across the street at the kitchen, it's not working. And not only is it not working, it's not fair. It's not humane to the folks who are involved in homelessness. It's not fair to your business.
Especially, well, not especially, but it's certainly a component of it is that it isn't fair to the businesses. In the 40 years now that I've been where I am in my business, not once has a city employee come in to say, what can we do for you? How can we help you? Mayor DePaulis was the mayor when the homeless shelter was put in place. He promised all of us that there would be a mitigation of all the negative impacts that the shelter would cause. That was a promise that he couldn't keep or wouldn't. And none of the other mayors since wouldn't or couldn't. So not once has somebody come to me and said, what can we do for your business to help you stay in the neighborhood? Because we've lost a number of businesses in the neighborhoods surrounding the shelter. And it's obvious that they can't stay there. They're not safe. Their customers don't want to come into the neighborhood. I have customers that don't come anymore because they have to come into this neighborhood. So what can the city council do to make the businesses want to stay? I hear all this talk about what we can do for the homeless and what we're doing to provide better service for the homeless folks. But what can be done for the businesses that are paying the taxes and sticking around?
You know, that's a tough question. I've never been asked that question before. You know, and I don't know if I have the right answer. And I'm not going to make you any promises that I can't keep. But what I really think the city council needs to do is they need to take that acute look and focus and actually study why the two aren't working and why the two aren't mixing, right? We have to understand, for one, why we have the issues that we have with our homeless population. We need to understand why you're frustrated. We need to understand why your neighbors who own businesses are frustrated and why it's not working. So that it's a long, long process, you know what I mean? And
40 years long.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for you.
That's fair enough.
So I'm going to look into that.
You brought up a really interesting issue. You said maybe all someone needs is a month's rent. How do we address that issue before they get evicted?
Yeah, and to me that comes down to making sure we have affordable housing. Affordable.
But affordable for who? And
yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's affordable if I just got fired and I have $3. There's no housing that's affordable. So how do we address the issue at the need as opposed to on Rio Grande Street?
In what sense? Like
I mean, I'm throwing out a big picture question. I realize that, but you brought up the issue. Maybe what they need is a month's rent.
Yeah, somebody should be able to, an organization that can keep them in
So yeah, I mean, it seems to me that it would cost the city and the county a lot less to say, let's figure out a way to give you a low interest loan or something to get you back on your feet. You have a place to stay, a home base where you can get up and shower and go look for a job.
Yeah, for sure. And those are the things we have to look at, you know, and this woman in front of me just mentioned transitional housing. You know, we don't often use the term transitional housing as much as we used to. It's kind of all lumped into that affordable housing talk. But affordable housing has different tiers in different sectors. You know, there's anything from 30% AMI all the way up to 80% AMI. Of course, 80% AMI folks, area median income folks, probably don't have the needs, and certainly don't have the needs of folks who are at that 30%, the lowest levels of affordable housing needs. You know, so in essence, I really feel like we need to make sure that we have the affordable housing stock. I'm going to go back to that again, because if somebody is stable, they're not living paycheck to paycheck. If you're spending more than 50 or 30% of your income on your housing, that's not sustainable. It's not sustainable for you, it's not sustainable for your family. And right now we have 10,000 households where people live in Salt Lake City out of 73,000 who are in that very high risk, 50% of their income is going to their housing. And that makes it more of an issue when you think about people living paycheck to paycheck and moving in and out of home. So we have to create that affordable housing stock, not only for our very low income folks, but also for our workforce as well.
It's Nate.
Nate.
This may not be fair because we didn't ask it together individually, it just dawned on me. Earlier, we were talking about Pioneer Park and how 8 years ago it was really a place that you didn't want to go into. And I have noticed that it's cleaned up and it's not perfect, but it's better. But usually my experience has been whenever you displace the homeless from one area, all they do is migrate to another area.
Sure.
And I've seen an increase in the Rio Grande area location. If you were elected, what would you do to make sure that we're not just shifting the problem from one area, one geographic area, to another? How would you ensure that the increased law enforcement efforts in one area isn't just shifting?
Yeah, for sure. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. You know, we're seeing it's like a balloon. It's like a chess game. You know, when you go on the offensive in one area, it pushes things out to other areas of the city. And we're seeing that in Sugar House. We're seeing it in my neighborhood in Central City, in Liberty Park and the Artesian Well. And they just tore down a church where they're putting a new development where it would basically turn into a tent city at nighttime. So what we have to do, in my opinion, is going back to the affordable housing, making sure that those options are available to create stability. And secondly, we have a lot of unique opportunities to actually reduce our number of homeless folks who are involved in crime. Things like mental health issues, if they're being, having issues with law enforcement because of that, because that does go on, to be realistic. If they're having issues with drug rehabilitation and the services that can actually help them, get rehabilitated. Our state law just changed here. The legislation was passed last year. The county just passed a housing levy a couple of weeks ago, all geared towards mental health and drug rehabilitation services as another avenue to something like jail. We're learning now, it's taken us 20 or so years to realize that tough on crime, legislation and laws isn't working. It's just filled our jails up. It's created incredibly high recidivism rates. And these things aren't sustainable, not for our future. We have to make sure that we're jumping on board with the county, with the state, to utilize the monies that they're saving, not only to go towards the services that I'm mentioning, mental health and drug, but also make sure that they're investing into the systemic issues. Things like education, things like affordable housing. And I really feel like the city's best opportunity to jump on board is in creating that affordable housing stock. We have to do this, not only to create the stability, but to provide the opportunity for folks to keep them in something that's stable. And not only something that's stable in their home, but in their own skin. We have to reduce the numbers of homeless folks, bottom line. And I really feel like we're missing the boat when it comes to those services that I mentioned.
Yeah, hi, I am a resident of District 4 and have been for about 5 or 6 years now. I've lived in affordable housing, low-income housing for about 4 or 5 years now, and I've been a downtown resident for about 10 years. first of all, can I just make a statement about affordable housing? Affordable housing is only as good as the backup support that's there. Having lived for numerous years in housing, where many of the units are voucher, social service voucher units, there's lots of turnover rate. Those people end up back out in the street. But my question is, what are your views on parking downtown, and what is your view on downtown residents and paid parking, 2-hour parking, having myself pay probably more than $5,000 in tickets over the past 5 years? Why do I, as someone who lives downtown, not only spends money downtown, but lives downtown, why do I have to pay the same amount as someone who's traveling or commuting to shop from Provo or Draper or Holiday?
Certainly, we have incredible parking issues in downtown Salt Lake. They extended the hours to 8 o'clock. That's put a lot of business folks at risk. A lot of folks that I talk to, the Cinegrill guy, for example, he was probably the one that I've talked to that's the most vocal about the parking issues. It actually, in his opinion, is deterring folks, especially his customer base, from wanting to go downtown and pay for that parking during the dinner hours. And that's what really he feels like is what suffered his business the most and why he moved to where he does have a parking lot available to him for his customers. In a residential standpoint, it's a mess too. We're constantly, every year almost, raising the amount that we have to pay for our permits in our neighborhood. And where you live is a neighborhood. Let's be realistic. And if we're not providing those resources and opportunities to where you're at, that's a problem that we have to look at. Because I'm not too far behind you with
I'm all about I'm all about the bikes, making biker from the city, but people realistically still need vehicles to travel outside.
Certainly, and there's a lot of folks that I talk to on the east side of my neighborhood. My parents still live who they're not able to ride a bike downtown just because of their age or other disabilities that they might have. So we have to think about a cohesive network of opportunities, not just for a specific population or a specific group, but we have to think about everybody that's involved in our community and the needs that they have.
So Nate, I'm just going to, I think you've heard this question before, I'm just going to ask and not read this whole thing. Would you support moving the homeless shelter?
I go back and forth on the homeless shelter. And me and you have had this conversation before.
This is from large business owner Mike Peters.
Okay.
And he's really just looking for yes or no.
I'm not going to rule it out. I'm not going to rule it out.
So
I want to make sure.
Maybe.
I want to make sure that we have the data, the information that we need to make an informed decision.
Okay, great. And then the second question: would you support an anti-loitering ordinance?
Again, you have to look at the data and the information. I know that we have.
You really are becoming a good politician already.
Thanks,
yes or no?
You would know.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was impressed. Yes or no?
It'd be something I would look into. For sure. I know where I went to school in Portland, Oregon, that was something that they instituted there as well. Had incredible homeless issues, a lot like we do now.
Sure.
And I think it's something that has helped.
Okay, so that's...
It's a soft maybe. How's that?
That's good. Today, people got the ballot and your name's on it.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming.
It's really cool.
It's really cool. So, 30 seconds. Why should we vote for Nate Salazar to be Council District 4 representative?
Certainly. You got to vote for me because I put in the work. I've been my neighborhood association president. I've been my East chair, the vice chair of the East Central Community Council. I've been in politics. I've hit the streets for folks like Dave Jones, like Archie, like Pete, who have had a profound impact. They've given me the opportunity to have that experience and to have that influence. My background in social work, the work that I do now with United Way of Salt Lake as a community school director, we have to work together. And that's the work that I do every day, not only as vice chair of the community council, but it's the work that I'm doing on the library board with John. It's the work that I'm doing in our community at large, right? I'm not only on city boards and commissions, I'm also on the Utah East Foundation Board of Trustees, because I know we have serious risks and issues when it comes to infectious diseases, especially when it comes to young men who look like me. Hispanic males and men of color are the most at risk of being diagnosed with HIV and AIDS. And we need those kinds of perspectives when we're dealing with those types of issues. A perspective of somebody from my community who can say, look, this is what programming could look like and what programming ought to look like, based on my own lived experience and my own skin here in the city and in the state.
May I just ask one quick question? I understand you're sitting on the fence with regards to moving the shelter. What about moving the children and their guardians who are living with, right now, 51 sexual predators, and in the sample I looked at today, 80% of the 15 were child predators? What would you do? Would you have them move?
Absolutely. I am in complete favor of dissecting the population up in order to provide those targeted services that I was talking with these guys about. We can't continue to operate under a guise that says one typical type of service is going to work for everybody. It's not the case. We have to make sure that folks who have mental health issues have the services that they need. And it's very specific. I've been a case manager before. I've worked in the mental health world. I've worked with youth. You know, Kathy, I know what your folks go through every day. And I left juvenile justice services because I was so frustrated with the system. I wasn't frustrated with JJS. I was frustrated that I was just putting another Band-Aid on a systemic issue. And that's what we're dealing with right now in the city when it comes to homelessness.
So what if you could move the children today, and this is a very tough question because people don't have necessarily an answer, but in an ideal world, where would you want them to be?
You know what?
The children and their guardians.
You know what's interesting is District 4 has the most mental health, drug rehabilitation units, facilities than any other part of the city. And if they're not in District 4, they're on the borders. You know, we need to grow and add to the capacity that these organizations can actually manage. I would love to make sure that we disperse. I would love to keep families and children in a central location if that's not feasible right now until we get a facility for them. Let's disperse them into these other facilities that we do have. Let's contract, let's partner. Let's make sure that we're not working in these silos that...
Could you name a couple?
You know, we have Odyssey, we have, I can't name them all, and I don't know all of them by name, I'm sorry that I can't. But I know that they're there, you know, we have them available to us, you know, I mean, they're all throughout District 4, you know, whether they're drug or whether they're mental health services, they're everywhere. And I would love to see a commuter kind of system that is specifically for our women and children and our families and other populations within our homeless population to take them to the services that they need to get to on a day-to-day basis.
Could you take one more question? We just have one more.
I was just wondering, has anybody ever thought if the road home is going to be redone, about keeping the families there and moving the other one further out?
Ideally, that's what I would ideally like to
It's
see.
the families, I mean.
Yeah, but bottom line, going to Clotilde's comment, they're the ones who are most at risk.
That's what I mean. So you kept
Move the other population
them
away.
there, but you moved the others.
Yeah.
The
and
ones that are the, you know.
at this point, I think it would be much harder to move everybody else but the women and children from that location. I think strategically and logistically it would make more sense to move kind of the smaller population, like Clotilde's mentioning, and disperse them out or find another location for them in the interim, and then perhaps.
So the families and the women and children, there's just not
They-
that large of a population.
It's not as big as, in my understanding, it's not as big as, you know, certainly the men that Clotilde's talking about and the overall population demographic that we see down.
Maybe one other quick thing, are you going to be looking at human trafficking of youth,
Oh, yeah.
especially in light of what happens at the city library if you're elected? And if so, what are you thinking?
In what regard?
Well, we see a lot of, there's a lot of youth trafficking that happens in the shelter area, and you have, as we've talked about in other meetings, you share the population. These populations at the library and also the shelter intersect of necessity. We see the same people in both locations often. And so I'm worried about the youth who are being trafficked sexually, and it's something that Kathy has to deal with VOA, et cetera. I'm wondering where you are with that. And again, it's something I want to talk further with you about if we can't do that today.
It has to be something that we work on. And that's why education and homelessness are the #1 things that I'm working on. And like
Is
I
the
said,
board thinking
a
about
couple of
that
them.
you sit on at the library? About what happens to youth?
No, I've had this conversation with John Clotilde, and John knows how I stand, and I'll use my exact words in my meeting with John. We have to make sure that we have an emphasis on making sure that the most vulnerable of the vulnerable, these are these ones who are trafficked. These are the ones who are diverse, who have skin color that looks like mine. we need to make sure that those opportunities, whether it's a VOA partnership, whether it's partnerships with other organizations who actually specifically work with and address the issues on a cultural level, they need to be involved in the conversation. And John, you can hold me to that. Because I sat in a meeting with him, and I told him that. And that's what we have to do.
So last question so we can all go.
Okay.
Here we go. Would you support having the library open 7 by 24?
7 by 24?
Oh, that's...
What's 7 by 20? Is that just the opposite of...
No,
that's 24/7.
24/7.
That's 24/7.
You know,
it wasn't a trick question.
Okay, I was wondering, like, you're just messing up the numbers there. No, it's okay. And from the very beginning, and you can go back and look at the records, when John first introduced this to us, I said, John, I'm not going to support this unless we do it right. And I'm the only one on the board that said we need to create partnerships with mental health service providers, if it's the University of Utah or otherwise, to actually address the specific needs, like mental health and drug rehabilitation issues, to make sure that we're mitigating those kinds of occurrences that can't happen with the populations who suffer from those kinds of illnesses and disease.
Round of applause for a great campaign. Best of luck to you, and I'm telling you, we appreciate your courage to be up here, and it takes a lot of courage, so thank you. And John, maybe we'll have you speak at our next meeting to talk about the 24 by 7 concept. And so we'll do that. Thank you all for staying. I think Pete was going to buy us dinner tonight. We all endured.
Those are some good enchiladas.
Yeah, the best enchiladas in the state. So if you go there and say it's the Pioneer Park Coalition, I think Pete's got it.
Sorry, Pete, they're not as good as my mom's. They're damn good.